Welcome, everybody. I'm Chris Jones. I'm with University of Arizona Cooperative Extension and the Natural Resource Extension Education Foundation. And we are here today to do our first fundraiser presentation, kind of history of ANREP. And so we've got Don Hanley to talk about know your roots and plant more seeds. We've got Sandy Smith, who's going to be the moderator. Here's our agenda. So just thank you for joining us. Sandy's going to give us going to take over here in just a moment. He's our moderator. Our speakers, Don Hanley, talk about know your roots and plant more seeds. We'll have a chat discussion with Don. We'll probably even just be able to open it up, and we'll end up at a quarter to the hour. And so here's Don. He is retired Washington State University Extension Forester and ANREP's first president. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sandy Smith.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're a small but mighty group, and thanks for coming. As you know, this is being recorded, so we do hope we'll have some asynchronous viewing from our friends. And we're going to do one of these every month to not just on history, but on things related to natural resources extension work and some of the challenges and issues people face, and just get dialogues going about some of the topics. And yes, as Chris mentioned, we're kind of organizing this through ANREP, which is this new charitable foundation that's set up to support essentially the professional development of natural resource educators. That's the main mission of the group. And it's a sister organization to ANREP, because ANREP is really the initial professional association, and this foundation is to support ANREP as well as potentially other natural resource extension education things too, but ANREP kind of will be guiding the way lots of times for ANREP funding opportunities. And so we're in the soft campaign, so to speak, this year, where we're trying to raise support among our own natural resource extension educators. And then we'll move to the corporate level here towards the end of the year, trying to seek donations and grants from corporations, be they conservation organizations, private foundations, or even companies, perhaps that manufacture outdoor equipment. But today, I have the honor to interview Don Hanley. I've known Don for roughly 25 years and always admired him. Don and I also are on the board of the ANREP group, and we've enjoyed working together over the last 3-4 years now, actually, as we formed this group, but it was only last year that we really were up and running. But Don, I'm going to just have a little time with you here, ask you a few questions, and I guess what I'll say, hold your questions to the end, to the audience, so that we get a chance to cover them perhaps during Don's talk, but there will be time for questions. And I see now it's 1:05, so well, at least my time, I'm hoping to go for about 25 minutes and just pick Don's brain a little bit, but also hear some things about ANREP as well as about his own past. And so, Don, to start off, I always like to kind of know what were the formative things in your life during your youth and early years that got you interested in the outdoors and natural resources.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for spending some time with us today. And it's wonderful to see people that I haven't seen for a long time on the program in the audience. Again, I'm Don Hanley, and I spent 36 years in extension. I'm retired from Washington State University, and I had a wonderful extension forestry career. I knew already in junior high school or early high school what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a forester. I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles, believe it or not, and I was a Boy Scout. And when I earned the Forestry Merit Badge, I knew that's what I wanted to do. It was just as simple as that. And I ended up going to, after graduating from high school, I ended up going to the University of Montana because of a person at this scout camp that I worked at in the Sierras. And he said to me, the University of Montana has a great forestry school. Why don't you go there? that was my sole source of research. And it turned out really well. I mean, you know, sometimes you just do the right things and you don't even know it. And so when we mentor students today to do research and where they want to go to school and so forth, I listened to one person and he said, go to Montana. And I did. And I haven't looked back. I ended up getting the bachelor's there, and I worked for a year or two after that in forest industry for the Anaconda Company, which was a big company at that time in Montana, had a lot of forest land. And then I went back and got a master's degree at the University of Montana, funded by the Forest Service. I had wonderful Forest Service mentors at that time. All this was all in silviculture. And then I went a lot of other places after that and the like, but ended up at the University of Idaho. And I wrote I was doing research on a plantation, on a ponderosa pine plantation, and that had been well established many years before I went there. And I wrote it up, and then I said, you know, there's a lot of good information here that small forest landowners, they should know this. This is really good stuff because it related to their forest types in that part of Idaho. I went to the extension forester, and he was about 30 years in the job. He was near retirement, and all he said to me was, yeah, go ahead and write it up. And I wrote up an extension bulletin about that work. And that was my sole introduction to extension. He retired about 6 months after I wrote that ponderosa pine silviculture extension bulletin. And I was fortunate to get his job. And that's how I started as an extension forestry specialist at the University of Idaho. I was there for about 9-10 years. I had tenure at the University of Idaho. Everybody thought I was set, and then I moved. I gave that up, and I moved 8 miles. I moved to the university 8 miles away, Washington State University, but ended up going to Seattle. I never worked on campus at WSU, but I worked for them for 26 years at the University of Washington through a rather unique cooperative agreement, because the University of Washington was the primary forestry school in Washington, but WSU was the land grant school. And it was a great collaboration that we had at that time. So that's basically my biographical background. I love being in extension. I'm still involved in extension. And one of the big highlights of my career, clearly, was working with many of you in the establishment of ANREP. So that's
wow, you did such a great job. You answered virtually every single question I had in brief. So that was great, Don. And let me back up just a couple points here. Just curious to know what your parents thought of a career in forestry for their son.
Neither one of my parents went to college. They were very supportive of education, but they were high school graduates. My father was a machinist. He was an excellent machinist that ran a lathe, a milling machine. You know, he went to work every day and stood in front of a piece of equipment to run it. My mother was a homemaker, and they could tell that that's what they knew, that I was set. I knew what I wanted to do early in my career, and they were always supportive. Going all the way to Montana, they weren't too excited about that, but I knew what I wanted to do, and that was it. And they supported me always.
Boy, that's impressive. You're a little different than some people I've talked to over the years that, you know, have kind of a circuitous route, which led them into forestry, but you really were influenced early on. And the influence was from an outside person, which is a little different because usually it's a parent or a grandparent that does that, but that's cool to hear. So you touched on ANREP, Don, and, you know, you were involved in the beginning. And of course, my earliest memory of you was at the first ANREP meeting, and it was it Minnesota? I think it was. No, Wisconsin. Or no, Minnesota.
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 And you were the president, and that's the first time I ever set eyes on you. And I thought, this is the kind of guy I like to work with, and enjoyed, seeing you exercise leadership at that time. And I think it inspired me a little bit. But I want to hear more about those early times about ANREP, and why did you need ANREP? You had the SAF, you had other groups. You had the National County Agents Association, you had the Wildlife Society. Why did we need ANREP?
Well, this is a very good question. And I was amazed at how great the last meeting was a month or so ago and how it's evolved. And what it started with about a dozen of us, a dozen extension forestry specialists from around the country. And we would meet every 2 or 3 years. Unofficially, there was no JSEP, there was no blessing of this as a national organization, but we met and we got to know each other, and we quickly realized that it didn't matter where you were from. There were some issues that that everyone was facing. We were thought of as what's the right way to say this? As stepchildren of agriculture. The County Agents Association was the big gorilla. They had a subcommittee for forestry like it was a single crop in agriculture. There were many people in that organization that thought of forestry as simply growing trees in rows like carrots. And we knew that wasn't correct. We knew there was a bigger picture to forestry than that. I always called myself an extension generalist, not an extension specialist, because I was expected to know everything about forestry, not just about a single tree species. And so we got a little frustrated maybe over this. And we kept meeting every 3 years or so. We met, and it was the same group of about a dozen to 20 people, but a dozen of us were the most concerned about, we need better representation at the national level. We had a person who was the USDA rep to Extension Forestry named Larry Biles, who we all really thought was a great person. And he represented us extremely well at the national level. And we liked him as a person. I haven't talked to him for years. I assume he's fairly elderly now. But he was very instrumental on our side. He was an extensions forestry specialist for many, many years. And and we had an event, we kept getting together, and we had an individual that came to one of our programs, a USDA administrator, and he was a little gruff. We'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to give you his name or where it was, but he stood in front of the audience and he took Larry Biles to task. Now, he was probably Larry Biles' boss, and he embarrassed us. And we think he embarrassed himself, but I don't think he realized it, because he stood in front of us and he poked Larry Biles in the chest and said we were a dysfunctional family and we should just be quiet and get in line with everybody else. Well, that was the end. That was the end of our meeting. That was the end of our agenda for that session. And we kindly asked this man to leave, which he did. And we then said, we need better representation at the national level of what extension forestry is all about. And we were thinking strictly forestry at this point. There was the County Agents Association, and they were good people, don't get me wrong, but they were a little hostile. They thought, well, who are you? Why should you be doing this? You're just simply part of us. Well, again, we knew that was not the case. We needed something that represented forestry at that point. So then about a dozen of us got together and started working on this. And we didn't know what to do. There were no rules. There was no procedure. There was nothing. How did we go about forming our own organization? JSEP may have been in existence at that point. I'm not quite sure, but there were no rules. So Larry Biles then took up our cause and went to ECOP, the organization, and they said, it's not part of us. We don't know what the rules are. And we then got some marching orders back from, believe it or not, the County Agents Association, who was the big gorilla of the extension organizations at that point. They gave us a punch list that they, I think, just made up, quite frankly. And it was maybe 10 items long. And there were some daunting things on that list. I think they wanted to discourage us. But I looked at that and said, we now have a punch list. You know, when you buy or sell a house, there's always a punch list of what you have to fix or what do you want fixed and all that stuff. And I said, we now have our marching orders. And there was some turmoil in our group of about a dozen that really stepped up. And they were from all over the country. And I said, let's start working on these. And it took us probably 3 years. And there is a good history of ANREP on the ANREP webpage that is a good summary of all of this. So you can look at that on your leisure. But it took us about 3 years to go through this list. I was adamant that we're going to get through that list. Well, they didn't, the group, the 10 or 12 or more or so people, they didn't ever elect me as president. I was appointed. Okay, Mel Bauman from Minnesota, and I, and Mark Vodek from New Jersey sat down to write the bylaws for this new organization. And Mark was the primary author. He gets credit for being our Thomas Jefferson, if you will. And he did a great job. And Mel and I scribbled it up and worked on it. And then we had these marching orders. And that was just one item on this punch list. You had to have some bylaws and stuff like that. And so long story short, it took us 3 years or so to get through these 10 items. Well, once we then presented that back to the group, which was essentially the County Agents Association, they knew they were had because they gave us this daunting list and we met every one of the items on it. So they couldn't say, well, you're not worthy to be a part of an organization, blah, 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 blah. So we then formed the association. And I have to look at some notes here. What we actually called ourselves was the National Association of Forestry Extension Professionals. We quickly realized that that was too limiting because at that point we had wildlife people, we had water people, we had the other natural resource people coming to us and say, we have the same issues, we have the same problems, we want to be part of you. So that's how we evolved the name ANREP to encompass a bigger group of natural resource people. There are many other individuals along the line that contributed very significantly to this. And if I start listing everybody, I'll miss somebody. But there's one person that I want to definitely mention, and that was Scott Reed at Oregon State. Scott was one of us. He was an extension forestry specialist. And he started actually in Minnesota, and then he went to Oregon. And he was part of us, but he started moving up the administrative chain at Oregon State at about the same time. And he ultimately became the complete extension director at Oregon State. And I know retired a year or so ago. And he's been an ANREP member and supporter from day one. He really worked hard behind the scenes with the other extension directors as an administrator, not just as a specialist. Saying we need this, and that's really significant. And then there were numerous other people, and you can peruse the list of who became the president over at each year as we evolved. Quickly, Mel Bauman and I sat down over a cup of coffee one day, and they said they want either one of us to be the first president of this organization. So I can't say that we flipped a coin and Mel won the coin toss, so I became president. But Mel is a really good person, very intense, but he was getting some associate deanship responsibilities right at that time at Minnesota. So he said, "Why don't you be the first one and I'll be number two?" And I said, "Okay, we'll do that." And that's how it all came about.
Well, okay. Well, Don, you've answered just about every other question I had, so I don't have to ask those. But I want to come back to first thing, you've had a long career and you mentioned you retired. And I'd like to hear a little bit about, the later years in terms of how ANREP developed, I guess, how you saw it developing. So if you'd comment on that, please. And then kind of wrap up that. We've only got about 5 minutes total here for you. Mention about the idea of ANREP and how that originated and why do we have that today? So ANREP was the parent of ANREP.
Yes.
And talk about that for a moment.
Okay. There are some key items of how ANREP evolved. Clearly, the other disciplines that came in, so it became natural resources, not just forestry. There was a key component when we got more of what used to be called the community resource people, the planners. I used to call them the planners, but that's made a huge improvement in ANREP over time. How people think about natural resources in their own unique states. But we kept thinking about these people, our group, our association members, they needed additional resources to help them blossom, to be better extension professionals. And again, we went back to the list of ANREP past presidents, and we established what was called the Past Presidents Fund. And I was fortunate to be part of that. And we promoted, hey, you guys are all really good ANREP people, you know what's going on, you know where we need some funds to help new people in our organization, to help people blossom, to get to their full potential. So we started this Past Presidents Fund. I do believe it was Mel Ballman, again, or someone else, I can't quite remember, said we need a tax deductible foundation so we can contribute and others can contribute to this organization for the betterment of the organization and the people involved. That got us thinking then about establishing this what we call now ANREP, the tax deductible foundation, to help support professional development and natural resource extension in its entirety. Many of those past presidents said, yes, we will donate more when it's official, because the Past Presidents Fund was official. It was just almost like it was a handshake deal. So now we have an official foundation. I do believe Chris, our host here today, he's the one that asked me if I would sit on the board. I've never figured out how he got my name, but he did. And I feel fortunate to be part of ANREP board at this point. It's a great group of folks that promote this tax deductible foundation. Sandy's our leader currently, and we think we're doing some good work, and we wish to continue that.
Don, excuse me, let me emphasize there that it was the money that some of the past presidents chipped in that we used to pay for an accountant to help us do the IRS paperwork and get organized properly. We incorporated in the state of Idaho, and because we had to incorporate somewhere, and that's where our accountant was. And then the IRS paper went in and got approved, and so we became a nationally recognized charity. Where IRS, approved as a nonprofit charity foundation, and then what Don mentioned is the rest of the story. It was the past presidents who chipped in the money, and that's how we used it. So instead of just like funding travel scholarships for 1 year, we said, let's do something that's going to last for many years into the future. So thank you, Don, for all that great background information. Now, looking at the time, I see we have just about 15 minutes left, so not too much time. Let me just open it up to questions here. If anybody wants to ask Don a question directly, just turn on your mic and shout it out. There's 11 people total on.
It's great to
hello,
have everybody
Jeff.
here.
Hello,
Don,
Jeff. Hello, James. Who's talking? Chris?
yeah, this is Chris. Don, I'm just going to say that Sandy deserves that credit of bringing you onto the board. I remember he felt strongly having you be part of it. I'm really happy that you're part of the board. And what I'd like to do, if anybody wants to talk, I can put the spotlight on them. We can have the little, but anyway, just unmute. This is a meeting. And Don, thank you so much for sharing all that great information with us.
Yeah, so succinct, Don. Beautiful. And let me just compliment Don. Don is a little older than the rest of us, but he's younger than most of us here. He keeps up with technology. He keeps up with the kinds of things we're doing. And when we want information about what we should do today, we call Don. He has got the mind of a teenager, I think sometimes. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all the guidance he gives us all the time. We have a board for ANREP of 7 trustees, and Don's one of them. And you can count on Don to sort of give us a youthful perspective on things. So it really kind of makes me see how ANREP got going so well, because Don was so involved in it.
There was a dozen of us that really did that. All the work was done by about a dozen folks. And then it evolved to many, many more, especially when we became part of JSIP. That was an absolute important decision that we made. Yeah. And it's so great to see what's happening now. I learned at the last meeting, there's over 500 members now.
In ANREP.
That makes me feel so great.
We had a little dip there for a while. Now we're back up. It was very surprising to see. Yeah. And one of our trustees, actually, he's not our trustee, our treasurer is now the executive secretary of ANREP. So he keeps us abreast of ANREP. That's Dean Solomon. So he keeps us abreast of the numbers and things. So ANREP is still strong, and we're hoping that we will grow together. But let's open up. Karen, you got a question. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to have say something. Don, thanks for that little trip down memory lane. A lot of what you talked about predated my involvement with ANREP. But I will say that even though a dozen people did most of the work, in 1995, the Extension Foresters had a National Extension Foresters Conference in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, if you recall. And there were about over 100 people there with speakers, and it was a real conference. And at that meeting, the group of foresters that were there endorsed the work of the dozen or so hard workers and voted it in. I mean, we weren't an organization yet, but as Extension is famous for collaborating and partnering and being a big tent, anybody that was there that wanted to could vote. And so I just point that out. And I know this for a fact because I co-chaired that meeting with Les Biles. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to thank you for the trip down memory lane and then add a little bit more to it.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. That's useful to hear that additional history there. Yeah.
Yep. And it went fast at that point. And it was a good, we all knew we were doing the right thing because as quickly as people joined and got on board at that point.
Yeah. Any other questions from the group here?
Well, I have a question. Yeah, I'm just curious what your aspirations are for ANREP.
Okay,
Yeah.
you know what? I'll answer that question in just a moment, Karen. Let me just wrap up and see if there's any other questions for Don here. John, go ahead.
Yeah, Sandy, thank you. Don, I was curious about one fact you mentioned in relating the history of your involvement with forming ANREP. You said that JSEP didn't exist.
Well, misspoke. We
Okay.
we didn't know that they didn't. We had
Okay, I got you. Okay,
no understanding of the importance of JSEP at that point.
gotcha.
And that's why we may have stumbled a little bit initially because we were told the president, whose name escapes me, I honestly cannot remember who he was. He was the president of the County Agents Association, and he was also the big gorilla in JSEP at that point.
Okay, gotcha. He was chair.
So he was talking for JSEP, but we interpreted it as from the County Agents Association.
Right.
And for those that don't know, JSEP is the Joint Council of Extension Professionals, and it's the leadership of all these professional groups: the County Agents Association, the 4-H Educators Association, the Home Economists and Family Consumer Science Group, and a couple others, or at least one other there. And then us now, we're an equal player at the national level, ANREP is.
Right, and Bill, I know Bill Hubbard, when he was president, as the Southern rep, he really pushed that, and we got the JSEP, joined JSEP officially, I believe, when he was president, which took a number of years.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, to keep moving things along here, first thing I'm gonna play a switcheroo here. I'm going to change my background and put on a different hat. Thank you so much, Don, though, for your, you're just sharing there with us from a personal level. It's a lot of fun to work with you. And I hope that we can have you do and talk to groups again. I'm going to move so you can see here. So I'm putting on the ANREP hat right now. And let me close that down. Okay, so if you want to learn more about ANREP, the place to go is just anrep.org. But what we're going to do here for a moment is I'll tell you a little bit about ANREP. We have a 1.5-minute video. It's a little promo video of our campaign this year. And let me just say that ANREP is a struggling group right now. We're just a small group. We have our trustees, and that's it. There's no membership in ANREP. Foundations don't usually have membership. We have an audience that we serve, and that is everyone that does natural resources extension work. It isn't just ANREP members, but in fact, most of your dedicated and devoted extension educators that are doing natural resources work happen to be in ANREP. But we incorporated, and then we got our IRS approval, and we struggle a little bit because of the pandemic. Honestly, we were going to be doing this a year ago, but we decided, you know what, running a campaign in the middle of this pandemic was just inappropriate. And so we spent a year actually talking, doing focus groups and talking with educators, and it really helped us. The pandemic has all these silver linings that we're realizing now. And one of them was that it slowed us down a little bit and got us thinking about our vision and our mission. And without reading you something, let me just tell you that bottom line was we realized our biggest role should be to support the professional development of natural resource extension educators, because no one is really doing that. You have the states do it, and you get a little bit of national kinds of stuff, but ANREP does it, but ANREP needs support in doing that, right? We need to be able to accept, donations and contributions that are those groups want to have as tax deductible. And we also need to be there for the non-ANREP members who are doing good natural resources extension work and support professional development for them. So that's what ANREP is all about. And before we do questions, we have a 1 minute and 30-second video that Chris is going to queue up for us, if it isn't already. And then I'll come back and I'll tell you just a couple more things, and we'll be done here in about 10 minutes. Whoop.
It just stopped right in the middle. I don't know what happened.
Okay, well, we're going to roll with the punches there. All right, so you can go to the ANREP.org website and watch that without the interruption. And essentially, it's a beautiful little video that Lara Mulligan put together. And it just kind of tells you that we have a campaign going on. And the campaign is to raise $20,210 this year for ANREP. And the campaign at this stage is with our own natural resources extension educators, hoping that they will give $20.21. And if we had 400 or so donations, we would meet our goal. And we're a little along the way here. We have roughly $4,000 raised. So we're not dirt poor, we're just poor. And this money is tax deductible, and you can, feel the satisfaction of having contributed to this founding organization. And you get this really cool limited editions water bottle sticker when you do that. Another thing I wanted to mention is that we provide an opportunity for memorial kinds of donations. If someone has passed away and you want to give in honor of someone, and we had one this year already to one of our colleagues who passed away, one of our extension educators who was in ANREP to pass away. So some people have started to recognize that as an opportunity. We also have the opportunity to receive these minimum distributions from people after they retire. There's certain requirements. They have to give away some of their I don't know what you call it, their nest egg a little bit every year. And so there's all sorts of things, as well as small remainder, that kinds of things in wills. So let's say you have a 2% leftover when you're doing your will, you can say, give it to ANREP. And that can also be a tax deductible kind of thing. So, but really what we want to be able to say by the end of this year is that we've had strong support, and we know we've had strong support from our trustees and the past presidents. Though there's still a few past presidents, we haven't reached it, but for the most part, we've had that strong support. And we'd like to be able to say we've had strong support from other natural resources extension educators, a large group of them. And now we want to continue to encourage that kind of support, but also go to corporations and foundations and say, hey, we've got a group here that's got broad support, and this is what we do. And an investment in educating and providing professional development opportunities for natural resources educators is going to benefit everybody. It's going to help climate change. It's going to help conserve, water. It's going to be improving the environment of the world by educating the people who do the kind of work to educate the citizenry of the United States. So that's really the kind of the punchline here, or the campaign line. I'm not telling you to give. I'm saying if you're interested, just go to ANREP.org and contribute 2021. But we have a few more minutes. Be happy to answer questions or comments if you have any. I'm sure there's some questions about ANREP that we haven't answered in this short program. But let me just tell you this: we plan to do one of these every month for the next to the end of the year. And next month we're going to have a panel or a couple people talking about the challenges that women have had in natural resources extension education. And other months we'll have other types of speakers. Maybe some of you would be interested in contributing something towards just a unique program to attract natural resource educators too. And we'd love to hear about it, because we only have a few ideas right now, but we'll try to do one of these every month to provide some educational opportunities, as well as some professional development, so to speak. In this case today, it was a trip down memory lane, as Karen said, but it was also, it's good to know our roots, right? And then, of course, ANREP is about planting seeds for the future. And we're hoping in 20 years, now ANREP has been around just about 25 years now. We're hoping in 25 years that will be, a very strong foundation, and one that makes a big difference. But people believed in ANREP in the beginning, and we believe in the potential, the promise of ANREP as well, as a sister organization to ANREP. So I'll say no more. Anybody want to make a comment or a thought there? I'll pick on a few people if you don't.
I'll make a marketing comment, Sandy, just to be
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah.
I like your backdrop.
I got to sit over here.
No, it's good. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you got a little room there over your shoulder to go ahead and spell ANREP out a little bit.
Good point. Good point. Yep. I know we say it all the time and think everybody knows what we're talking about. I want to credit Bob Barden with coming up with that design. He's not exactly, he was on one of our trustees and initially he's no longer on our board, but he said, well, I can do that. And he used some sort of stock images and such and put together a little thing. That's a good point, James. I think we ought to spell it out. In fact, we've struggled a little bit. Some people said, does it have anything to do with the ocean, ANREP? And yet this is how we're incorporated and such. So we can't really change our name, but we ought to spell it all out and then maybe put ANREP in parentheses too.
If they have money, we nod our head yes, go, yeah, we're all about the ocean and the reef.
That's right. National Reefs Association. That's a good point. All right, I'm going to pick on some.
This is Kelly.
yeah.
I have a quick question, and
Yeah.
I'm sure when I go to your anrep.org, I'll probably see the answer. But
Sure.
by any chance, have you set yourself up as a charitable organization to receive automatic funding from Amazon?
Yes, that was our first thing.
Oh, good.
Amazon,
Okay.
Amazon Smile. Yep.
I'm going to go ahead today and switch you right over. Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. In fact, that was our first fundraiser, and it has raised some money for us. When you're buying something in Amazon, you just go to Amazon. I think it's .smile, and then like 1% of your purchase comes back, and it doesn't change your price at all, but 1% comes back to us. And you have to put in the full name, Natural Resources Extension Education Foundation. And we are recognized there. And we also have an accountability kind of accreditation from this group that, for foundations that prove that we are truly IRS approved and that we are filing our taxes and such. I think we're at the bronze level now, and we have a little bit higher activity. It's kind of like a seal of approval, like good housekeeping seal of approval for foundations. So that's also showing on our website. But no, Amazon Smile is good way to contribute. In fact, if you spend a lot of money, maybe that 2021 will come in to ANREP from your Amazon Smile purchases. Let me jump to Jeff. Jeff, you're one of our former presidents, and if I remember right, when we were in Alaska, you were either the president or the past president. I think you were the president that year. And did you ever fancy that we'd have a foundation associated with ANREP? Were you thinking about that kind of thing then?
Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about that at that point in time, but I know a few other people were, and there was always this past president's fund that was being talked about. And anyway, it took some dedicated individuals, many of whom are on this call, to make it a reality. And I think it's great. I've contributed my portion for the year, and I'd love to continue to do so. It's something I really believe in, and I don't think my career would have been the same without ANREP and then looking forward ANREF.
Thanks, Jeff. Now, these are totally unsolicited remarks too. We didn't pay Jeff for his kind comments. So let me jump to Ramona. Ramona, what do you think about ANREF? Ramona is also one of our trustees, and it's got a lot of great ideas, and she's going to do the interview next month, or the interview or discussion time next month. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so thank you, Sandy and Don, for your time today. I have been on ANREP board for a couple of years now. I served as the ANREP treasurer, and I got recruited, and I remember the founding documents that Chris Jones circulated. So I was really impressed that we were actually able to launch this and then to be invited on to be a trustee on the board. And we're always thinking about how we can promote ANREP, our Natural Resources Foundation, to our ANREP members. We know that at the ANREP conference, we certainly tried to do that, but I think there is still a little bit of confusion about what our function is and how that relates to ANREP. So hopefully these webinars and sessions will do that. And Don has graciously agreed to reach out to one of our first female ANREP presidents. And hopefully that scheduled interview webinar will be on for next month. If not, it will probably be early August. But I think all of our trustees are committed to promoting ANREP and to meeting our campaign goals. We got a little bit off track last year with 2020. Our hope was to really be going in 2020, but nobody planned 2020 the way it was. So we are relaunching, restarting, and reinvigorating our campaign this year. So thanks, Andy.
Yeah. You know, one of the featured programs this morning on NPR, when I was getting ready for work, was about environmental justice and minorities. And boy, there's a lot of issues around that. I think if anybody's looked into that and listened to programs on that. And I can see ANREP working to help educate our own educators in this area. And I know Ramona's interested in this topic, but it was a program that was probably a good 10-minute program, which for NPR, that's a lot of time devoted to that. And just looking at racial inequities and related to the environment, and how there are so many issues today that need understanding about. So I hope you'll maybe even chat next time about that, Ramona, with your guest, or in the future we'll talk about that too. There's just a lot of issues that are prime kinds of things that ANREP can be educating educators about, providing professional development opportunities. Yeah. Well, we are out of time. We are certainly happy to stay on. This has been recorded, and we'll distribute the link so that people who couldn't come, hopefully we'll get as many or more watch it. But we'll stay on. That means Don and Chris and I, and anybody else wants to stay on, we'll chat with you as long as you want. We so appreciate your coming today. Thanks very much. Get back to work, do good work. And if you think of ANREP and want to contribute to the campaign this year, now's your opportunity. And you get that special limited edition water bottle sticker, which if you've given already and haven't gotten the sticker, Eli assures us that they're in the mail. So Eli was with us today. Maybe he already left, but I don't know. Are you still there, Eli? Let's see. There he is. He is there. Eli, do you have a sticker to show us? Oh, maybe he's there, but not there. You know how it is with Zoom. You can be there and not there.
Well, thank you, Sandy. I'm going to take this opportunity to just shut down the camera and we can keep on talking. And great work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen,
Not
for
the camera,
coming.
but just the recording.